scientists are telling us that in order to avoid the catastrophic effects of climate change, the global net human-caused emissions of carbon dioxide will need to fall by about 45% from 2010 by 2030, reaching overall net zero by around 2050. And achieving this individually would be extremely difficult. But by working together and making small and big changes, we can make this goal a reality. So here at Hindu Climate Action, we aim to mobilize the Hindu community in tackling this ongoing climate emergency. And we aim to achieve this by raising awareness of climate change, educating individuals, and working with organizations on the steps that they can take to reduce their carbon footprint. Also, through using our ancient wisdom, we want to highlight the religious importance of living an environmentally friendly life. So using this In Conversation With platform, we'll be highlighting the work of Hindu climate activists, organizations and sampradaya here in the UK. And we hope that through showcasing these community members, more and more people will feel inspired to join us in fighting this important cause. So if you or your organization would like to be involved with this, please do send me an email. It's namaste@hinduklimateaction.org, or send me a message on the Facebook pages or Instagram page and I'll reply. So I'd firstly like to introduce the National Hindu Students Forum, the NHSF UK, and thank them for joining us in our first In Conversation With. So to give you a little bit of an introduction to who they are, NHSF was founded originally in 1991 by a group of young Hindu students from university in London, and they were founded with the one purpose of providing Hindu students at universities across the UK with a safe space to explore their Hindu identity. And to date, they now have over 4,000 active members at 47 universities across the country, and it's very, very impressive. So we'll be speaking to Diplodia, who is currently the acting treasurer of the NHSF National Committee, and we'll be speaking to him to see what they are actively doing to engage their Hindu community in making these sustainable choices. So thank you very much, Dip, for joining us.
Namaste. Thank you for having me on.
No, thank you. Could I ask you really quickly to just tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Yes, sure. So I studied economics and politics at Aston University, graduated back in 2019. My journey with NHSF started about 4 or 5 years ago as I was a treasurer at Aston University, Hindu Society. Following in my final year, I was also part of the advisory team at AHS. Since then, I've joined NHSF and as a campus team member initially, and now I'm the national treasurer.
Oh, amazing. I think we could jump right into it. What do you think are some of the most important Hindu concepts to you that illustrate sort of protecting the environment and why it's so important within our tradition?
Well, Priya, our duty, our dharma, for me is all about our actions, and our actions which need to be sustainable, right? And
Definitely.
That is when we're exploring our identity, our seva, one of the central branches us Hindus explore is ahimsa. For those of you who don't know, ahimsa is when we mean the least harm, the least harm to the mind, the least harm to the body, and also the least harm to the environment. And this is totally aligned with our dharma, right? And therefore, we should be totally aligned with protecting the environment. And I don't want to go into too much detail here, but you know, a lot of our scriptures guide us to believe that we're actually, you know, we're made out of nature, that we come from nature. Bhumiji is a Devi, Sitama grew from the ground, you know, we worship Tulsi Ji. Around the globe, we have loads of sacred rivers, mountains, animals that we worship, which is why, for me, protecting the environment is so important to maintain our tradition going forward.
Absolutely. There's this quote from Mahabharata which says just that. Adroha sarvabhuteshu karmanama nisagara anugrahas chadanam cha satam dharmaha sanatanaha. And that's just saying exactly what you just said. So never display malice towards any living being. through your actions, thoughts, or words, acts of kindness and giving in charity. And that's the Sanatan Dharma, which is adhered to by a righteous person. So these ideas of non-harm and compassion, like karuna, they're so clear in our scriptures.
Absolutely.
So it feels right, just aligned with who we are as Hindus, to practice this environmentalism and doing what we can to minimize our harm.
Yeah.
You know, back to your work with like NHSF, do you think within your community of Hindu students, caring about the environment is important? Or
I think what we are finding is, and unfortunately I don't have any numbers or visuals to show you this, but I think what we're seeing is less the need for our students to campaign this issue. Obviously, we have HCA who do a wonderful job to bring it forward and bring it to light. But I think what I'm seeing in students, and in particular Hindu students, is a change in habits, in the change of their own behavior. I think things like simple things like, I remember while at university, and even people at university right now, recycling things is the normal now. It's not, oh, we need to recycle this. You know, people are using more and more reusable bottles. You know, they're taking their coffee mugs, the same coffee mugs, to the shops to get coffee. People are turning vegan, and that's not something that they're campaigning on, but rather there's a shift in behavioral norm, which is what we're seeing. And it's it tells me that absolutely students, Hindu students, do care about the environment, and subconsciously they're already making efforts to make those changes.
absolutely, I think especially within my group. So I'm studying at Bristol, and I've been a part of my chapter for about 3 years now.
Yeah.
In all of our events, the food we serve would naturally be either vegetarian or vegan, and that's not specifically because we want to be environmental. It's a part of our scripture, and as a result, we're making decisions which are good for our planet. But also there is that sort of cultural shift. I've definitely noticed it. You can see it. People, especially our age, they're just campaigning and they see the difference. Like, okay, taking one mug with you isn't going to be a massive strain, but it does have a long-term positive impact. What do you guys do to sort of facilitate your chapters? So a chapter, for people who aren't familiar with NHSF, is a specific group or society at a university, and they're just called chapters. But at a sort of like a national and an individual chapter level, what steps have you seen students take or decisions made to like minimize their impact?
Yeah, well, so I think there's lots happening. A lot of our chapters, you know, are taking this issue a lot more seriously, and you know, the biggest thing for us is to raise the awareness, right? So I think if we start from our chapters, and it's very well explained, our chapters are of universities that are affiliated with us. Some examples I'd like to share. So Manchester University, for example, for the last 3 or 4 years, every Seva week in February, they plant trees. We have a lot of our chapters that have recycling initiatives. So while I was at university, we used to, you know, go on walks to pick up litter, for example. We have a range of Seva activities at other chapters where instead of buying new murtis, they will go to a mandir and they'll restore a murti. So instead of, you know, just buying a new one, spending more money, they will go in and help restore something, which I think is brilliant. And even that on a national level, what we really like to do is set an example. So you probably noticed now at all of our events we use biodegradable plates and cutlery. All our meals at our events are all vegan now. Our publications, if 4 or 5 years ago we used to have published publications like the Hum magazine, they're all now digital, so we're not printing any of them off. A few years ago, our freshest packs, which used to come in loads of plastic bags, which we send out to all of our members at Freshers Week. We got rid of the plastic bags and replaced them with cloth, reusable cloth bags. And just in general with the items we have on the Freshers Packs as well. So instead of things that you use once, we're trying to put in an idea of reusable items. So last year we had reusable bottles, we had metal straws instead of plastic ones, so you can keep using it. All still enjoyable to the student, still useful to the student, but also taking the environment into factor. As a treasurer, for me, a lot of these things, believe it or not, cost more than normal. So biodegradable plates would cost more than the free plastic ones would be offered. But at NHSF UK, we value the cost of the earth over the cost of our bank balance. And I think we are still conscious that our impact on everything will set an example for our chapters to follow, and we want to keep that integrity, and that's how we want to carry on going forward.
Those are some really great things. I didn't know that people were restoring murtis. I think that's such a nice way to sort of connect with your wider community, because as students, trying to remember that sort of place you came from, if you grew up going to a mandir, and connecting with your new home and the community members there, just through restoring a murti which they might not have use for. That's a really nice way to sort of keep in line with that sort of maintaining a circular economy and reducing waste, but also not throwing away our murtis and letting them end up somewhere other than a home. I think that's lovely. I also really liked the idea of chapters doing litter picks, because there's such power in just having people who are all passionate about something coming together. And I found students are always looking for something to do in terms of improving the people, like the setting around them and the places they live. So through a simple act of just being with your friends but doing something good, that's a really nice thing for sort of NHSF to encourage their chapters to do.
Yeah, I think that's one of the brilliant things about our chapters across the country, really, is that we provide that platform, we provide that home away from home for students in the UK, where they can come together as a family, make loads of friendships, but still do something that's impactful to the community. So things like our Seva weeks, where they'll do something to help the community, help local mandirs, help the environment. All of those things, is something nearly every single chapter does, and that's what's brilliant, because you're there with your friends, and what seems like an enjoyable activity at the time is actually so impactful and so powerful for the rest of the community around them, which is brilliant to see, really. Definitely.
And we're at this point now where making these decisions and doing all of these actions, it's such a pressing issue, so that if we can align ourselves and learn more and educate ourselves on what's happening in our world, moving forward, when we come to making decisions about how we want to live our lives and set up our houses, we can make the right decisions so that our impact long term is minimized.
Yeah, and at NHSF, we absolutely believe that on the ground is where we start, and the biggest thing for us is raising awareness. I think as soon as you raise awareness, you can reach that platform and truly see what impact we're putting on our climate and our environment and our surroundings, and that's what we try and achieve, is to raise that awareness amongst our students and see that natural change in behavioural norms.
Definitely. And it was also really interesting that you mentioned earlier how oftentimes making these swaps and going from something which is single use and disposable and changing to something which is either reusable or biodegradable, it does cost a lot more. And I am finding now that as things become more common within our society, that there are so many options available. So switching from plastic cups to your own cups when you go to a coffee shop. There's those incentives. So if you will be going to a coffee shop every day, the coffee shop now tend to give you money off when you go if you bring your own cup, because it's not only beneficial for them in terms of reducing their impact, but also economically, it's easier for them to have you bring a cup and them not have to spend the money on it. So it's sort of a win-win for everyone if making that one swap reduces your impact, but could also save you money each time you go.
Exactly, and that incentives like that, I think, is something that will help us bring this forward a bit more. And you can ask every student if they are offered a couple of pounds or a couple of pounds here and there off their coffee and their food in the morning, then yeah, students grab at that. So if all it is to bring a cup with you, I'm sure all of us by now own at least a reusable mug or so, which we can use. We just hope that going forward, more and more companies do this. And I think absolutely little things like that will eventually show us some results going forward.
Definitely, it's that shift in mindset. If more people want it, then naturally the different businesses, organizations, they'll have to respond to what the people need and what the people want. And I also think it's really great that you're trying to reduce the impact of Freshers Week, because we all know, all the students know, there's so much waste that happens at a Freshers Fair. Obviously, this year was different with it all being digital. There wasn't as many sort of like leaflets and booklets being printed out. And I know it was me, I wasn't as educated when I did my Freshers Week. I used to just pick up all the free stuff I wanted. And then when it came around to it, at the end of the day, I didn't need or want any of those things. So I'd have to go home with this massive plastic bag full of just, dare I say, rubbish, and have to throw it away because I picked it up from the stall in that Freshers Fair. And it's not just me, there's thousands of students all across the countries, hundreds of universities just doing exactly the same thing. So I think you guys making that switch and just going from plastic bags to disposable, to tote bags, it's such a simple swap to make, but long term, there's so much more use for those things. And also giving out metal straws and plastic reusable bottles or metal bottles at the start of the year, right when students are settling in and beginning to form those new habits in that new environment. I think it's a great way to sort of encourage the right behaviours really early on. So when it comes around to it later, they can just get into the habit of taking this mug with them or this bottle with them, rather than having to spend too much money on a new bottle each day just because it's there for convenience.
Yeah, no, I think that's part of that was exactly behind our thinking. You know, how do we give something to students which, you know, is still relatable to student life, but we're making sure that they're taking into account, and, you know, just again, I come back to this point of just raising that awareness that little bit more of, you know, why, making them think, why is there metal straws, not plastic straws? And just hoping that instead of them going out and buying some plastic straws, that they just continue using the metal straws.
Definitely. So I've had some questions come in. I forgot to mention this earlier. If anyone does have any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat. I have one of my other HCA team members who's going to let me know. I've got a few come in just to let you know. And one of the things is, do you think there's a real need right now for us all to work together to drive and see this real action happen? And we've slightly touched on this before.
Yeah, you know, is there a need? Absolutely, there is a need. I think, like you mentioned earlier, I think scientists are saying, are bringing out all these stats, and you know, they're really saying that by 2050, a lot of our things that we have, or a lot of our norms right now, will change because of the impact on our climate. So yeah, is there a need for something like this, and for us to take action now? Absolutely. I think I spoke to you a couple of weeks ago about this issue, and we mentioned that the same thing was being said back in the 60s. The same thing was again mentioned. Oh, should we act now or should we leave on later? in the 80s and the 90s. You know, every decade, the question is asked. You know, there's this impact on our climate. Shall we act now? And every decade we've delayed it. And there's only so much we can carry on doing that. I think for us, and as Hindus, our dharma is, like I said before, it's all about our actions. And if our actions are let it go, the next generation will deal with it, then we're not following our dharma anymore. So our dharma tells us that, yes, absolutely, there is a need and we need to act now rather than later. And I think that's exactly what a lot of our organizations now are doing, which is really good to see.
Definitely. I mean, we've all known about climate change. It's a word that everyone knows, everyone's heard about it, but it's making sure that you take responsibility for yourself and your own actions, but then also talking to people around you, having those conversations, discussing within your own household, okay, what can we do to try and reduce our impact? And I think that's definitely just where to start, and it can only get bigger from there. You know, it's those small changes that inevitably go bigger through spreading the word and educating. It's not just educating yourself, but taking the time. There's so many great platforms now. So just through being involved with HCA, I've been exposed to so many people who have such good resources and just have put so much time into making it accessible, making the knowledge and the science accessible to everyone.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think there's a big role the youth can play here, and that's Hindu students around the UK can really make a big impact. And you know, we not only can we come and raise awareness, but education is a big thing as well. So what we're seeing is across all of our chapters is, or most of our chapters right now, are doing at least one talk or a session, workshop, whatever you call it, on this issue, which is good to see. And what we're really trying to achieve going forward is to have all of our chapters have at least one session a year on this issue, and you know, try and get this message out once again to raise awareness. But I think there's plenty of ways our youth can play a role in this. So we can even you know, reach out to our chancellors at all our universities and say, you know, this is an issue, let's act on it. What's the university doing on it? And you know, just shift that balance of, you know, the mindset, like you mentioned earlier. Talk to MPs about, you know, what's the community doing, what's the area doing. Again, all to raise awareness. As a grassroots organization, we believe that this is the correct approach, and you know, taking this bottom-up approach will make that change much higher up and hopefully have some good impact on our climate.
Definitely. That was actually one of the questions we got sent in. It was, do you think the Hindu youth in the UK have an important role in promoting this awareness on climate change within their samaj? And I think you've hit it right where it needs to be. Like just said, that if you educate and learn, then from there going forward, we'll see the right changes, because there's so much more, such as, yeah, lobbying your local council, be it in the place where you're studying or where you are at home. That can make such a big impact. But also your university, there's some really good resources out there. So Ecosia, that's a web browser that if you use it, and on average, like every 45 searches or so, they'll use the profits from those searches and put 80% of that towards planting trees. And they have planted millions of trees. And as a student, we do so much searching for research or what shows or whatever we're doing. We use the internet so much. Through switching to just a different browser, if we can make such a big impact, that's definitely something we can try and implement within our universities. And there are universities, I can't remember off the top of my head who they are, but they've lobbied so that the whole university browser is University Ecosia. And it's such a simple thing, because if the students want it and they campaign it within their student councils at their SUs, it could happen. And, you know, if NHSF and all of the Hindu top chapters could play a role in making that happen, I think it's great. I think it's definitely something we could do going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't even know about that. That's really good. And just like that, what our students really need to feel is that they can make this change. And like you said, if they campaign against the university, changes like this happen, and changes like this make a big impact. And not only that, they'll go home, they'll speak to their parents about this issue, they'll speak to their elders about this issue, and just pass the message down the line, and again raise awareness across the whole community, not just students.
Definitely. And one of the questions I also had come in is, how can we format these environmental issues to impact students in a way they become motivated to act? And I think we've sort of said this, that we can tailor it to be more specific to what we live on our day to day, but also through encouraging stuff like litter picks within our Hindu socks and lobbying government and lobbying your university. How do you think we could sort of tailor this work?
I think in terms of tailoring this work, I think I've already mentioned things like our freshers packs, still making them student friendly, still making something students really want. But at the same time, we're making that change in and helping the environment in some sort. But just setting that example as well, like using biodegradable plates at our events. All of our chapters have events across the whole year, and just switching from plastic to biodegradable plates, just things like that make a big difference. And I guess the format we take in this would simply be just, like I said again, making it something students enjoy. The idea here is not to advocate, but to inspire, and to set an example. So to empower our students to take this as an issue they take seriously going forward, we need to inspire them, rather than saying rather than advocating rules on them and saying you can and can't do this. So I think that's the format I would take.
I think that's also really important. We've all been told for how many years, okay, climate change is happening. We're already seeing the impacts just through climate, weather changing, weather patterns changing, the amount of plastic that we're seeing as we look around, not only here, but if you go abroad and see sort of at the shores, all of the plastic that was put into the ocean drifting back up. We all know this is happening, but it's making that shift from knowing about it to wanting to do action as a way to minimize that impact. And it's trying to bridge those two. We know, but then how do we action? And that would simply be through education. Yeah. Because I think as students, as Hindus, just as people, if you know what's happening, but also why it's happening, we'll feel that need to want to reduce that impact. So I know we're sort of coming up to the end of the time here. I don't want to keep it too long, but just to sort of end up, do you have a sort of a milestone in mind as NHSF UK, how as an organisation you can sort of maximise this impact in terms of protecting the environment?
Yeah, I mean, I've said this before, but for NHSF UK, on the ground, we aim to raise awareness across all of our chapters. We're striving to lead by an example, and actively play our part in reducing our impact on the climate. As an organisation, our ambition is for this approach to be adopted across all of our chapters, and again, one that does not advocate, but one that continues raising this awareness across our students. At the moment, we have a growing number of chapters already playing their part, like I mentioned earlier, and like we say, what a key milestone for us would be is getting all of our chapters to hold at least one session, like I mentioned earlier. So I think as a grassroots organisation, we're continuing making that impact, and through changing our behavioural norms. rather than actually campaigning, like I said earlier. And I think we're, like we say, we're not seeing it in person, but these changes are already happening. So I think for us as an organization, we just want to continue making that shift, and not campaign necessarily, but to get our students to really think about their impact and what they can do to change their impact on the climate.
That's great, and you guys clearly understand that approaching it in that sort of authority, saying you have to do one event a year rather than making it something that they want to do, wouldn't be the right way. So I really appreciate you guys and how you guys are approaching this, through showing them making these changes is good by sending out the right sort of packs and providing them the right resources. Naturally, they'll feel inspired and want to make those changes. I think that's great. Also, sort of like having an environmental rep per society, or having one event per society over the year, at least one, it could spark that passion within the people who go to those society meetings, who go to the RCs and go to the events. It would get them to want to have more events, and then naturally it could just go from there, and everyone could make the small changes. And over all of your 47 universities, you can have such a positive impact.
Yeah, absolutely, and that number is still growing as well. So the more and more universities that affiliate with us, the bigger our reach becomes, and we can really push this message across not just Hindu students, but all students around the UK.
And that's great. I think that's really, really great. Thank you so much for joining us. Just wanted to keep this one a little bit short, sort of like about half an hour, but just it's a really great way to introduce your work, what you guys are doing, and just have this conversation about sort of climate change and why making these decisions is so important right now for us, especially as such a big body of Hindu students here in the UK. So just to close off, thank you again. Really appreciate it.
No
so
worries.
much support towards NHSF.
Thank you for having me as well. Much appreciated, and thank you for letting NHSF UK be someone you're closely aligned to. So yeah, we look forward to working together again in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone who sent in questions. I think having that conversation and engaging with it is super important. If you guys do have any other questions or any ideas of how we can go forward as HCA or NHSF, do get involved with all that we're doing on our social media pages. You found us here on Facebook. We'll be on Instagram as well. That's for NHSF UK as well as HCA. And we've got mailing lists. The HCA mailing list is in the link of this live stream. We've got a bunch of upcoming events. So we have another In Conversation with at the end of December, and we'll release more details of that to come soon. Dib, do you have anything you wanted to sort of promote? If you've got any upcoming events or anything to say?
So at the moment, NHSF UK, we just had our Navratri events go through. We have a few more initiatives coming up in December and in January. So follow our media pages and to stay in touch with what's happening.
Okay, amazing. And thank you very much again. Right, and if anyone else does have any questions, do feel free to drop them into the comments. Me or Dib will be happy to answer anything else that you have.